Welcome to Burned and Better. I'm your host, Dr. Denisa Weber, a 7-figure CEO, speaker, mother, entrepreneur, and chiropractor. Over the last 15 years, I've faced the highest highs and the lowest lows of entrepreneurship, motherhood, and leadership. I've burned more times than I can count, but every time I've found a way through and come out better. This isn't about polished highlight reels. It's about the real, unfiltered side of leading, the kind of conversations usually kept behind closed doors. Here, I share my own stories and sit down with leaders who've stumbled, recalibrated, and built something worth leading. So if you've ever felt the weight of success or wonder what it looks like to fall hard but rise stronger, you're in the right place. Let's normalize the messy middle of leadership and step into the episode. Hey guys, hope you guys are doing well. I am going to get straight into it. This episode is totally about what happens in the pendulum swing from where there's no leadership at all to a complete antithesis to micromanagement, basically born out of wounds. If my first failure was not leading at all, my second was leading so hard that no one could breathe. I went from an absence of leadership to absolute scorched earth. And while that season burned a lot of people out, it also showed me what happens when you lead from some wounds not being healed instead of wisdom. Where I really think that this came from is just I didn't want to be blindsided again. I didn't want to be in that vulnerable spot anymore. I didn't want to be exposed, which is what happened in the first episode. I didn't want to be exposed to the fact that I knew that I sucked in that season. I didn't want anyone to know that I sucked. And basically going through that journey, going through that pivot, going through that getting in the weeds of everything in my practice to understanding what was going on, to hiring a new team, to all those kinds of things, I just completely swung to the other side. So I went from, I trust you so much that I don't look at anything, to I don't trust anybody. And I will micromanage your butt every which way to Sunday. I went from so uninvolved to hyper involved in every element, micromanaging every single detail and catching mistakes in real time. Now, some of this was beneficial, honestly, and that's where I sit in this tension between the two, because it's almost like watching game tape and being able to correct in real time. So with new employees, it was nice to give them feedback. Basically, we went from no structure before to absolute structure, from no meetings because we felt like in the small space we were constantly having meetings, to multiple meetings per week, to regular cadences of meeting pre and post shifts, to weekly staff meetings, to weekly doctors meetings, to monthly marketing meeting. It was structured. They were at a certain time, they started at a certain time, they ended at a certain time. But we went from no accountability to systems of accountability. And while that is healthy, there is a healthy way of doing that. There is also a way to unhealthily do that. And it all comes from a place of not trusting. These high standards sharpen performance, but in certain instances, it crushed morale. It's where the standard was so high that no one can meet it. And I will say that the blessing in having the high standard and having the micromanagement, a little bit of the micromanagement, there is a blessing in some of it, in more of new team members. They needed to know that I was looking at them, I was seeing their work, I knew what was going on. I also wanted basically my good team members to know I had their back, because I was not willing to have anyone hide behind good people doing all the work. And I was not going to allow someone to come in initial where they've done work when really somebody else did it. And we had a couple of those people, and they're not with us anymore. When I say that we were catching mistakes in real time, no one really had anything to hide behind because there was some sort of checklist, some sort of system, some sort of fail-safe that was basically showing where work was missed or who was accountable for it. There was blessings in this structure. It really served us well going into the next season. And at the same time, I was fixated. I was fixated on exposure because it meant that someone didn't have my back. I think that was leading out of a place of a wound. On the outside, it kind of looked like excellence, but on the inside, it was fear running the show. Here we are with this unhealed leadership. Basically, I'm punishing people who didn't even commit to the original wound. Some people were paying the price. And by that, I don't mean people who were coming in and actually really were taking advantage of the situation, or they weren't the right people that were in our office that needed to not be in our office. I'm talking about the people who were good that didn't need to experience the pressure. Micromanagement for me became the shield. The wrong people were being weeded out, but good people also left. And the intensity wasn't always about them. It was about not wanting to get hurt again. And so again, kind of leading from that place of fear that was just the danger of some of that unhealed leadership moving forward. Here's what the scorched earth season gave me. This is what I call my scorched earth season. And what I'm still learning to carry forward is that standards and trust, they have to live together. And micromanagement in the beginning, like it solves problems, but the hyper focus of micromanagement can break people. And in order to lead sustainably for me, like healing had to happen. And I had to start building and looking back at places where I could trust people. A book that's been really influential and eye-opening in this actual situation is called The Gap in the Gain. And it shows how basically you can live in the gap, which in the gap, you are constantly focusing and comparing yourself to the ideal, comparing yourself to the goal. And you live in this tension and you live in this place where you're constantly like, obviously the line, it can continue to move. So it's like you're never crossing it. And then you have the gain. The gain is looking back and saying, where have we come from? And when I look back in this whole journey, we came a long way. I've come a long way and worked through a lot of things to get to where we were. Our practice grew exponentially just because I changed, just because we got the right people in there. We were building the right culture. I'm very grateful for that. And you think that I would fixate more about looking back and saying, wow, look how far we've come. No. I am looking at, look how far we have yet to go to get to our ideal goal. And why this matters in this situation of the pendulum swing is I was so fixated on like, we're missing the mark, guys. Y'all are missing the mark. We are not hitting these things. Why aren't we hitting these things? Why can't you get your stuff together? Basically, constantly fixating on the negative. It's easier to go negative. And then the gain is looking back and saying, man, in the last 30 days, we have done X, Y, and Z. The last 60 days, we've done X, Y, and Z, comparing even to 90 days. That builds momentum. And so that's where that book really highlighted, man, I'm really living over here. And no wonder I'm miserable. Like, no wonder I suck the optimism out of the room, or as a leader, I'm coming in hot and it's scorched earth and energetically zapping my entire team, whether or not they were building momentum or not. And then people who are living in the gain are constantly positive. Like they're constantly comparing themselves to where they've been to where they are now. And what a gift that book's been. It's just been eye-opening for me to be more cognizant of, even in leading a team, what is going to help them is us seeing where we were, and what's going to help them is me actually doing it myself and then highlighting it for them. And then that way everyone can gain momentum, be more optimistic. They're more solution-oriented. They're more in their parasympathetic system. They're not in their sympathetic override when the boss comes in and is like, why aren't y'all doing this? Why aren't we hitting that? Who's responsible for that? It's just not a good breeding ground for growth. It's like the sun is constantly on the flower box. Those things are going to roast. And I've done that to even good team members. And so that book has been a gift for me. And if you haven't read it, I'd definitely suggest it. But I want to make sure that I start trusting my team. So when I say the gap in the gain, I started looking back on where are there places that my team has done things that make me trust them more? Can I list those out? Like so-and-so advocated for this and I didn't have to tell them to. This person reached out to one of our practice members, gifted them flowers, and went out of their way to make sure that we saw them. I didn't have to do that. And the more that I can write down these things, I can build trust with some of our team members that are like, yes, they're going to take care of it. And then from that trust, they know that I can trust them more and they start doing things better. So there is like this tension of, I do think that there's a blessing and a little bit of the blessing in micromanagement. I know some people would argue with me. And there's an unhealthy way of doing that. And so I just swung. It was just a pendulum swing where I was like, I will never allow me to be that vulnerable and exposed again. Then it did something as well, very similar to what it did on the other side, which is it made people leave. But overcorrection is common. It's just not sustainable. And so I'm moving more towards sustainability, but overcorrection was definitely my response to what had happened before. And some of you I know can probably relate to this because I've spoken to some of you. But that season taught me leadership isn't found at the edges of the pendulum. And I would argue, yes, it's found in the balance, but probably in the 50% between the middle and micromanagement. This is something I'm still working through, guys. It's like your thing is your baby, and then you get protected in mama bear mode, but then also just, again, trusting and making sure that you're building trust with the people that you've obviously have poured into in order to steward what you've been given. I'm super grateful for some of these lessons in here. I've also waited too long to let go of people. I've gone some more scorched earth on some people that I should have just let go earlier. I don't know about you guys, but just because they're good people does not mean that they are good for our team. I needed to hear that from some other people. They're not good in this position. They're not good for this team, but they are great people. And instead of having them in the organization for too long and then just hyper fixating and hyper focusing on them, why don't we just let them go and let them find their own way? This has been something that I'm constantly refining, but love to hear your takeaways on this episode and see if there's any other pendulum swingers out there. I bet you there are. Excited to get you guys to know a little bit more about Burned and Better in the next episode, and I will see you there. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in to Burned and Better. Follow the show so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, tap 5 stars or write us a quick review. That's how this work is going to grow. I'd love to hear what stood out for you in this conversation. Share this episode, tag me at Southern_Cairo on Instagram, and pass it on to someone who needs it today.